Hi everyone, this is Garrison here for Iron Kingdoms at War and Just the Bases, and I am here to talk about a very simple basing technique for a miniature that is already painted and even sometimes sealed and already slotted into its base. A lot of times you might think that a miniature that's already painted and on its base, cemented into its base, is there's very limited techniques you can do to make the base look good because you didn't pre-sculpt some details and do some cork basing, some pinning, things like that. That's not necessarily true. I'm going to show you a technique I like to call the half brick or ruined road approach to basing a miniature that's already on its base. This is a Daughter of the Flame from the Protector of Menoth faction of War Machine, which of course is a Privateer Press miniature product. And this is an example of a miniature that's already been based using the half brick method. And as you can see, what this basically is a brick texture on one side and a dirt texture on the other. And the idea is to depict a situation where you have an old decayed road or even a tiled chamber that's worn away, and now there's dirt covering half of it, and this is kind of being revealed underneath from the wear and tear of people traveling over this particular terrain. I always love bases and terrain that has a story to it. That's kind of the lore of why this base looks the way that it does. Alright, so I'm going to show you how to achieve that effect on a miniature, and I think you'll like the result, and I think you'll like how easy this is. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you the miniature we're going to be applying this to, which is another Daughter of the Flame, but as you can see, she does not have any basing yet, but it's a great example of a miniature that's already painted on her base, slotted in, glued in. Now of course you could do a simple sand texture just to finish this off, but why not do something that looks kind of neat with that half brick approach? So that's what we're going to do. Now notice this is a gray base because I primed my whole miniature. She was already glued onto the base when I primed her in a gray primer. So it's it's the same base that you see that are the black discs that come with many miniatures, and that's how it looked when it started. It's just gray because I've primed over it. At the end we're going to bring that black lip back with a little painting just to give it a nice finished look. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get our stone or our half brick texture on there. Now there's a bunch of materials you could use. You could use green stuff, of course. You could use spackle, or in the UK you all call it filler over there. You could use like Vallejo stone textures, but I'm going to use Milliput, which is a two-part putty, not unlike green stuff, except that it dries a lot faster than green stuff, especially under a hot lamp. So you can paint over it a little faster and kind of get things moving a little faster. And we're talking about basing. That's kind of something you want to move through somewhat swiftly. So I'm going to use Milliput. So here's the kind of Milliput I'm going to use. Let me zoom out here for a second. This is the yellow-green variety. There's a bunch of different colors. Color doesn't matter in the end because we're going to paint over it. But this is what I used. So Milliput, of course, comes as a two-part putty. And you're going to mix two parts together like you would green stuff. I'm going to move my nice background out of the way here for a second so I can mix on here. So you need very little of this to make the brick texture that I'll be showing you. Sorry for that kind of messy background there, but this is kind of messy to start with, so I don't want to obscure the display area for the technique later. So I'm going to slice just a little bit off of each one, equal parts, roughly. Okay, this is going to be more than I need. I'll actually be able to base the whole unit with this. Okay, I'm going to mix it together just by kneading it together like you would any two-part putty. I've heard people say with Milliput in particular, rolling it, is a great way to activate it, to get it into that putty texture that you need. Alright, so I'm just going to work with it here a little bit. Pretty much ready to go. Quickly ready to go. Now I will tell you it's a little tacky, so it's going to stick to your fingers a little bit. In fact, I've already got a little residue in my fingers. So what you're going to want to do is, when you apply it to the base and smooth it around on the base, get some water on your fingers or water on your X-Acto blade, which you'll see me using. So let me just put my backdrop in there again so we can see the technique a little more easily. Put my miniature back in place because she's the star of the show here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a little blob of this, a little ball, excuse me, maybe I could talk, a little ball of this, and I am going to put it, on one half of her base. Put it on that side, okay? that's pretty hideous right now, but soon it's going to look like something. So I'm going to dip, actually, I just have a little Dixie cup of water here. I'm just going to dip my fingertips in this water. And I'm going to go onto the miniature and manually just start to spread that out. This stuff is so easy to work with. It's a pleasure to work with. Okay, got a little water on my finger. So to a certain extent you can get in there with your fingers, but then really to spread it out thin, you're going to want to use a flat edge or a blade. And so now I'm going in with my X-Acto knife and I'm just going to smooth that down as best I can. I got a little extra over the lip, I need to take care of that. Avoiding to the greatest extent possible messing with the paint on the miniature. I'm going to go over some of that slot on the base, that unsightly slot that's so visible right now. But what I'm looking for right now is smooth. Smoothing this down, spreading it out. I don't want it thick. I don't want it all over the place. Sorry if I went off camera there. I'm going to use my blade to get rid of a little bit of this excess. Okay. And you know, keeping your fingers wet does a couple things. It helps you avoid getting fingerprint texture, of course, on your stone, which is very unnatural. And also allows you to work with the material a little more easily and spread it thin. Okay. So again, I got a little bit more over the lip there than I want. I'm getting rid of some of that and smoothing it back out. Okay, my finger got a little dry there. I'm just going to dip my fingertip in the water again and smooth this out. This stuff is a pleasure to work with. It's so forgiving. You still got a little bit more than I want there on that edge. So that's roughly it. Now if I go over to this side of the miniature, you can see I got a little height here. So I can just spread that down. Now you might say, wait, you didn't cover the slot. Well, I covered some of it, didn't cover all of it. It's really not a concern right now. The sand texture that we do on the other half is going to take care of a lot of that. So we've got our milliput stone, which is going to be our brick or stone on there. Now we need to talk about carving in the pattern. So what I'm going to do, this is so easy. Making sure I dip my blade in that little Dixie cup of water to keep it moist so it doesn't draw up the milliput as I put it in. I'm going to draw some lines in a vertical fashion here and carve into my material, roughly equidistant. Now if you want little tiny bricks, make the lines closer together. These are kind of like big, almost flagstone. And I've carved in a vertical direction in all these. Vertical, you know, relative to the way the mini's facing me. And that's going to do nicely. Now what I'm going to do, to make this easier, I'm going to turn the miniature this way. And I'm going to carve in lines so that these vertical lines that are the rows of bricks become bricks. So, in the other direction, perpendicular to the lines we described in, I'm going to draw some lines to delineate where these bricks are. If I go over the line a little bit, I can just go back in and kind of manually fix that up. In fact, that'll give the brick a little more character in the end. And then I'm going to continue that, stagger that every other row, so I get that nice brick look. Okay? And you could do this over the whole base, actually, and have a 100% of your brick texture. I didn't do that in this case because I like this kind of ruined road half dirt texture, which you'll see me do later in the video. Now this looks good. You could be kind of ready to go here, but a couple things I'm going to do. One thing I'm going to do to give this a little more character is I'm going to carve some cracks, a little bit lighter, not as deep as the grooves for the bricks. I'm going to carve some cracks into these bricks. Probably not extremely visible, although I think I can get it for you here. Hopefully you can see. Oops, that's too close. Sorry about that. Hopefully you can see some irregularities here and here, where I've carved some scratches, some cracks into the bricks that will really show up when we paint this thing. I'm going to put a couple of divots just with the tip of the X-Acto knife and some of the other bricks, just to give a little more character. And the last thing I'm going to do to consider these, before I consider these bricks done, is I'm going to take an old dry brush This is actually just an old brush that's going to turn into a dry brush. I'm just going to lightly press down and stipple a little texture in there with this old dry brush, which you can clean this, by the way, afterwards. Let's maintain this brush, just to give a little texture to that. Okay, so really our brick part of this, the trickier part of this, and you can see it wasn't that tricky, is done. All right, so I'm going to let this dry. Now this milliput takes about 2 hours. I found about 1.5 hours to 2 hours under hot lamps, like this. Is going to do the job to dry it out, and I'm going to be ready to paint it, which will be the next stage, which I'll show you in the next part of the video. So hang in there for 1 second while this dries, but movie magic means you only have to watch it dry. Be right back.